Huge themes are discussed in Joseph's first chapter from his book, The Fall. Sit back and prepare to be taken back to the beginning of everything here as Joseph reveals creation, individualization, and the Big Bang from an angelic perspective.
Hello, this is Tony Clarkson again at the Sanctuary of Healing, and my colleague, good friend, Michael G. Reccia. And this is the second in a series of videos about the fall. And in this particular episode, Michael is going to read chapter 1. And so without further ado, I'll hand over to Michael now.
Thank you, Tony.
Michael.
So chapter 1 is a transcript of the first trance session from the Fall book. It is titled In the Beginning, and this is Joseph throughout. A book starts at the beginning. A program starts at the beginning. A drama starts at the beginning. A very good place to start the beginning. And so to open this examination of why you are as you are at the moment, we must, relatively speaking, go back and back and back and back to the beginning, and to a time before you existed as you do now, but not before you existed, because you always existed. You existed as an aspect, a facet, an opinion, a point of view of the divine, of God. You existed encompassed by God, existing within God. But I have to take you further back than that in order for you to understand, to a time when the matter and space that you are surrounded with did not exist, when you existed simply as a potential, an individual potential wrapped around by the all-encompassing, all-embracing concept of God. In the beginning, there was no thing, and you can reference no thing in my first book, Revelation. There was no thing. There simply was is the wrong word. Is. There simply is. In the beginning, before all things, there was simply a state of is. And that state of is was and is the consciousness of God, the expression of God, the expression of what is. The is felt within itself a desire, not a need, because God does not have needs, a desire to examine aspects of its being, to express aspects of God's being, and to give not separation, but a form to parts of itself. And so, as a result of a desire to express and examine aspects of the whole, there was the first movement. Before that time, there was no movement. There was simply the is. Imagine you have a rope, and imagine that that rope is made up of separate fibers bound together to form the rope. Imagine, as an analogy, that God is and was the rope, and that there came a time when the rope wished to express and focus on the individual fibers. Those fibers were always a part of the whole, always part of the rope, but could be examined, if so wished, as individual fibers within the body of the rope. This is what the divine sought to do in the beginning. But you must understand that this is not the beginning of God. God is. This time scale I am talking about is to do with the beginning of your cycle, because we are examining who you are, where you are, and where you came from. At the beginning of this particular cycle, the is decided that it would examine the various fibers that made up part of the rope that is the is. I hope I am expressing this sufficiently well for you. I always knew that this book would be the hardest one to bring forth because of the concepts that we are dealing with do not translate exactly into the dimensions of where you are. An aspect of the is decided to examine the fibers within the rope that made up that aspect of the is. And in order to do that, it loosened the bonds within the rope. It gently untwisted the rope until the fibers became apparent as individual fibers, but still within the bounds of the rope. And when the fibers had been sufficiently loosened, the is placed part of its consciousness into each fiber. This is not creation as you understand it. This is divination, a desire to see things through different viewpoints. It is not creation at this point. It is simply a positioning of energy within the whole to give the illusion of separate consciousness to the fibers. The fibers that were then observed by the whole began to regard themselves as a separate viewpoint from the is, began to regard themselves as individuals, but not individuals as you understand the term, because at that early point in the creation of the area of space, time, and matter that you find yourself in, there was a conscious link to the is from the fibers. In other words, the fibers knew that they were the is, and at the same time were reflections, mirrors, and aspects of the is, but always contained within the is. There was a consciousness that was unlike your consciousness at this time. There was a glorification of being. There was an acceptance of the whole, and the all being the individual, and the individual being the whole and the all. And these fibers or beings that were made self-aware could be described as angels. From God came an angelic stream of consciousness, and the angels were light as God is light, or the expression and movement behind light. The angels were light, and at the same time that the fibers or angels were given being, creation began. Creation of this physical universe you find yourself in began. And it began as God's creation, yes, but as a generation away from that, as the creation of the angelic light or the fibers that came from the is. The fibers, being equal to God in their examination of being, had a desire to create. There was a desire to bring forth as God has brought forth his children, in effect, by disentangling the fibers from the rope. The fibers themselves then had a need to create. The fibers use condensed light, not as condensed as the light you find yourself in at the moment, in order to give form to their expression. You are living in a universe composed of light. So, from the is, you have the fibers, or angels, that are still part of the is. The angels, in turn, then loosened the area of influence around them, or the edges of their being, and condensed the light in the area that they created. Let me try and explain. As they loosened the edges of their being, they mingled those edges one to another, to another, to another, to form an area of creation. They donated something of their own essence, the edges, if you like, of their light sphere or aura, which they mingled together to create matter through slowing the rate and condensing the light at the edge of their auras. They were aware of themselves as individuals, but also as part of the is. They consciously chose to donate some of their light into a pool of potential that they could manipulate by their thoughts, wishes, and dreams. And the next sound that you hear is bang. Because as they condensed the light from the edges of their being, creation began. Your scientists say this and that about the Big Bang, but the Big Bang was created by the angelic fibers of the is deciding in love to create a playground, to create an area within which they could examine certain aspects of themselves because they were not all alike. Each fiber of God is a potential, a different potential of the is, and the is takes joy in multiplicity, in examining different potentials within itself and different reflections of itself. The angelic beings that were created within the rope when it was loosened were all different, and all had something different to contribute through the condensing and slowing down of light into the matter universe they were creating in order to experience themselves. So, behind the Big Bang was a wish. The Word was a wish, and the Word was made light. There was light. There was the Big Bang, and the angelic fibers segregated themselves, each according to their potential. Certain of them became in charge of construction, the construction of form within the matter universe that they had created. Certain of the angelic fibers became concerned with the sweeping away of form that did not please, that was not perfect, and was not the wish of the angelic group. Certain of them became concerned with how form looked, and an investigation into the potential of matter to bring forth exciting opportunities for the angelic forms to investigate and to experience. As these thought processes, examinations of self and generations of potential took place within the hearts and minds, and those are only analogous terms, of the angelic beings the universe formed, because behind the physical universe is an angelic framework. Thought produces form. And the is watched and experienced with joy as the angelic fibers within the rope created and examined physical form simply by wishing to do so. What I am trying to explain is that behind the physical universe there is a matrix of thought, and what you perceive to be aeons of time wherein planets and stars are born, worlds cool and solidify, and areas of space change and are attracted or repulsed by certain forces in the physical universe, are the hard matter reflections of the thought processes of the angelic group that governs, creates, and maintains this physical universe. Some people reading this book will be appalled at the suggestion that the physical universe came about through angelic creation and not through God creation. And to those of you, I would say, examine what has been said earlier in this chapter. The angelic forms came forth from the is and are a part of the is. Therefore, that part of the is that is the angelic forms created the universe. There is no conflict. There is no conflict with your religious upbringing. There is no conflict with the creation stories that you have. Creation came forth from God, from the is, but simply as the is first bringing forth a concentration on aspects of itself, which then decided to create a sphere within which they could experience and bring greater glory to the is by sending back to the is their experience. So, the physical universe that you are in began as a wish to bring to the is greater glory through the angelic beings that manifested as a result of the is wishing to examine aspects of itself. The point of this chapter is to break away your conception of the universe as being an expression of matter that may or may not have a spiritual purpose behind it. I want to turn that on its head and show you that in the beginning and now, the universe was and is a creation of spiritual will and thought process, not the other way around. What you comprehend and see as being real and solid is an expression of angelic thought and creation that is stable. You have a hierarchy of being, of purpose, and of the bringing forth of new states. You have the is. From the is comes the angelic form, and from the angelic form comes this particular universe. And I say this particular universe because there are other expressions of the is, but we shall examine them at a later date. It is this particular expression of the is that concerns you because from your point of perception, you are living within it, but not totally within it, because as with the physical universe being an expression of the motives of a spiritual group, you are the expression of a spiritual truth. And what you perceive to be you encased in matter is actually a projection from the spiritual truth that is you, that you have shifted your consciousness into and believed to be true. And the is looked upon, here we get back to biblical and religious teachings, the is, through his angelic expression, looked upon the condensation of light that had become the physical universe, and it was good. It was good. Because at that time it was good. And we shall examine in future how most of it is still good. It is only the particular region of time and space that you find yourself in that is not so good. The building blocks of the physical universe are particles of condensed light. I wonder if you dare say that to your scientists. Look no further for the secret of creation than to condensed light. A slowed vibration of light energy that gives an apparent form and is manipulated by the minds, the will, the dreams, and the harmony of an angelic group. Look no further than particles of condensed light, because particles of condensed light are what the angelic group that oversees this physical universe use to give form to matter. To simplify things, it is a process of first imagining and then giving form to those imaginings by grouping particles into the illusion of solid matter. As I deliver this first chapter through Michael, I am sitting on a chair, but the chair doesn't exist. Michael doesn't exist. The room doesn't exist as anything more than an illusion that takes form through condensed particles of light adhering to each other, governed by the wishes of an angelic group to be clustered in a certain way. I find this more tiring than any of the other deliveries, so I must, at this junction, end this particular section. But I will, as normal, ask for questions from the group, and you will forgive me if I exit at a time when I cannot maintain contact any longer. Are there questions?
And this is where we end this session. Thank you for that, Michael.
Thank you, Tony.
I had to read that chapter several times before I got it. And I know we've had discussions. You've helped me out on the understanding of it in the past. But it's such a fundamental, big beginning to the book, isn't it?
As he says, we've got to start at the beginning.
Got to start at the beginning.
How did we come about?
Exactly.
How do we come about in spiritual terms? Forget all the head-mind theories we have about creation. How did we actually come about? How did we separate from the in mind,
Exactly.
in heart, from that universal force? And that's what Joseph's talking about, of course.
And I found the analogy of the rope really useful.
Yes.
After reading a few times, I get it.
Yes, yes.
I'm a little bit of that rope.
And I think we should say that Joseph is setting up the scene and to please stick with us, because having put across a very complex concept in the first chapter, it then gets easier once you've got that into your mind.
Exactly. That's so true.
Yeah.
So in the next session, we can continue with the question and answers.
Yes.
And that, I hope, will alleviate some of the fears that some of the people might have on the understanding of that first chapter.
Yes, Joseph always invited us, didn't he, to expand on what he just talked about and to query it, any aspects of it that we didn't quite understand, and he would expand on that in the question and answer section.
It was Joseph's way of getting feedback, really, wasn't it?
Yes.
To say, have I covered everything?
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
Have I covered everything? Because it's a vast subject, and if I haven't covered everything, let's clear that up and let's fill in the missing pieces.
So we'll go through that next session.
We will indeed.
Okay, thanks, Michael. And thank you to all the audience for viewing this, for listening. I do hope you enjoyed it. It's a hard concept to get hold of, but once you get it, it makes the whole of life a lot easier to understand. And in the next session, we'll go through the questions and answers that we put to Joseph. So thank you very much for viewing, and we look forward to seeing you again in the next session. And so it's goodbye from Michael, and it's goodbye from me, and God bless to you all.
God bless. Take care.